to be.
This is your Doug Banks.
Yep.
Your Margaret Tabor.
Yes.
Heidi Mertler, and then we've got Dina. We're going to talk about all things encumbrances, and they're all from the Office of Finance with the exception of Dina. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Heidi, do you want to lead, or?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start on a few things, just because they did say there would be new people possibly coming later on, and we were taping it. One thing we do want to discuss is, where does right-of-way services go? It can go either place. It can go in PE or it can go in right-of-way. If you're requesting it before you have environmental, then it goes in environmental. I know I am convinced that the districts have you guys locked in a corner basement somewhere and don't let you out. But you really need to get your estimate in the PE phase if that's when you're going to do your work. So that when they request the PE environmental, your services amount is in there, because we are required to give the full estimate of the work. And when we go for environmental, that includes your right-of-way services. So you want to try and get those in there if you can. The other thing is, after environmental is cleared, or if you don't have environmental work that's being funded federally, then we're usually going to stick those same right-of-way services with your right-of-way authorization. Usually you're doing that either after the environmental is cleared, or there's not going to be any other work in there. And so that's when they go in right-of-way services, in the full right-of-way. So if we get full right-of-way authorization, environmental is cleared, you still have those services included. Okay, any questions on the PE right-of-way services? No, we're doing good. Either we're doing really good or we're not doing well at all. So, okay.
So what you were talking about is when we go for federal authorization to do right-of-way acquisition under preliminary engineering.
Well, what we're doing is the services only, no acquisition. We can't do acquisition under PE, only the services.
So you're doing titles, you're doing appraisal review. Okay.
Mm-hmm. You cannot talk to the property owner at all under that phase.
Sure.
You have to make sure you have right-of-way full acquisition before you can talk to the property owner. And to have that, then you'd have to have the environmental clear. And of course, you have to give the full estimate. And this is sometimes where we get a little confused. The full estimate is the full estimate to do all the work you're requesting authorization for. It doesn't matter when you're going to get it encumbered. If you're going to get part of it encumbered now and part of it encumbered 6 months from now, that doesn't matter. The feds still want the entire estimate for that phase of work. If you're getting full right away, then you need the entire estimate to go in that. Okay.
What does the term encumbered even mean?
Okay, well, they'll get to that,
Okay.
but from a federal perspective, they don't, encumbering and federal means nothing the same. We obligate federally, and we obligate those funds unbeknownst to anyone else at ODOT. When we need to, when the bills are coming in, or when we need to at the end of the federal fiscal year, we will encumber funds. We will obligate funds. And once we obligate, you can't switch the funds. It's not like encumbering where you can reduce it or do whatever. Obligation, you can't switch them in and out. Even if we've obligated them in that year, you can't switch to a different fund. Now, encumbering, Margaret and Doug will talk about, and that is different than how we handle it federally. Okay. The other thing is partial right-of-way, and that's for whole takes, hardship purchases, or if you just want certain parcels, then you can get a partial authorization. It may be you're not ready to get all of it, or only the environmental is cleared on some of those large projects for just a portion of it, so you're ready to go there. But remember, that is where we've had some big mistakes, is in purchasing those and getting those partials. A long time ago, probably almost 10 years ago, we had a required purchase in District 8. Somebody sued us because they were saying hardship because people knew a road was coming through. They wanted to sell their property. So we were court ordered to buy the property. When we're court ordered to do so, the feds will participate. Well, they saw that there was a right-of-way authorization, and they continued about 5-6 years later to make purchases. Well, $8 million later, it was caught that they never had authorization to purchase anything but the one parcel. So then we have to find state funds real quick. So just remember, if you get anything partial, it can be very dangerous. You have to remember what you have. So whenever you can get the full, I would advise you get the full. It just helps with mistakes later down the road, helps prevent them. Okay, any questions so far?
Yeah, can we back up one thing?
Sure.
When you come out and you said we can do titles and appraisals before the environmental.
Titles, appraisals, appraisal reviews.
Services. Appraisals, we have to come talk to the property owner.
Well,
We can't make an
She
offer.
means
Yeah, you can't- yeah, you-
initiation
yeah.
of negotiations.
You can't start anything.
That's, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. And let me think what else. Oh, early acquisitions, that's a new thing. Early acquisitions requires a new federal project number, which is a new fan. They require that goes completely on a separate one. So you'll see that different fan. When you put the funding events corresponding to that, please put like early acquisition and then name it whatever you want. I did have somebody who worked here almost 30 years say, you mean we can change the name of the funding events at Alice? Yes, you can. So you can name those whatever is useful to you. Okay. Anything else? And real quick on the authorizations, you just send the form in. Just make sure that you get authorization prior to any work being done, because that is something they will hold our feet to the fire on. If you've begun work, there's no ifs, ands, and buts, they're done. So remember that, you have to get them on board early. And then, because if not, they will not allow the authorization. Okay.
Most of you guys have probably already noticed in the updates in Ellis now, beyond that funding page, it's very clear whether or not you've got federal authorization and when you got it. Ellis used to be a little confusing that way, but it's pretty clear on that page now.
And you have to remember that the old authorizations may not have up-to-date amounts. You'll see if it says, it'll say something over there that it hasn't been verified. If it's not verified, don't trust it because it's not verified. It's probably an older authorization before we got FPM, which is how we go over to the federal system and request authorization. So if that hasn't been updated since we went live with FPM, then you cannot always trust it. So make sure it doesn't say not verified in FPM. Okay. Do you guys like that page? Is it helpful? Has anybody seen it? Okay. Remember, you have to have a STIP ID. Once in a while I get a not applicable, but it is applicable, so make sure you have a STIP ID. Unless you have a DSR, you need a STIP ID. And just check the boxes and send it to me. Any questions about anything? It's pretty easy, I think.
To get federal authorization, generally, what all do we need? Obviously, we need a STIP. What else do you need?
Well, if you're going for full right-of-way and not just the services, then you have to have the environmental clear.
So environmental clear.
Now, just to let you know that there is a difference between the state and the federal. When the state shuts down at the end of the state fiscal year, that does not shut the federal system down. If you have to go to controlling board, it doesn't mean you can't ask for federal authorization. It just means you can't encumber until you get controlling board. So just know that you can still move ahead with your federal authorization if you're waiting on a state function to happen.
Okay, so we can apply for federal authorization prior to getting state monies encumbered.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, you have to. You have to. You cannot get anything encumbered federally unless it's been authorized.
Okay.
So if you haven't had your budget fully restored or the budgets aren't out there yet for the new state year, you can still get federal authorization. You just have to wait until you get your budget to encumber. But sometimes the authorizations will take a week or two federally. They seem to be taking longer than they used to. So you can go ahead and start that process. And then hopefully by the time you get your authorization, you'll have everything ready you need federally, for the state.
Are there any common problems that you see with getting federal authorization, something that happens over and over again that's an issue?
The one thing is that on the right-of-way services, we have environmental, and then 6 months later, we're adding money for the services, which technically, that estimate should have been included. And that's just trying to get with whoever does the environmental in your district and make sure that they know you're gonna want services and how much is gonna be out there. And just remember too, I need the estimate. I've had districts give me an estimate that's different than what's in Ellis, which is fine. I just need the correct estimate. And one of them told me, well, we hold budget. We put extra in there just in case, which is fine. Just make sure that I get the correct estimate.
What does federal authorization mean?
It means that the federal government agrees that they will join us in this project. We've set the pro rata. We've basically given them the scope of the project is set at the very first authorization. And they've agreed that they will go in with us at this pro rata and for this scope of work.
What happens if ODOT does title work or actually purchases real estate needed for a project, and then after the fact comes back and attempts to get federal authorization?
You can't. I mean, you can get federal authorization for the construction, but like I said, that is right in federal law. You must get authorization first. That's like trying to buy a house before you've written a contract for the house. It can't
So the
be
feds
done.
aren't going to reimburse if you do an acquisition function prior to authorization?
No, they will not.
It'll be completely state dollars at that point.
Right.
then.
And if you're doing something off the state route, then we're really in trouble. Because then we can't use our state gas tax dollars.
Hey, Heidi, something that just came up recently. Can you clarify, if we want to do a early acquisition, advanced acquisition, whatever, with 100% state money, we're gonna use our own funds up front. Obviously, mindset would be, well, we're using our own money, we don't need to get federal authorization. But if we intend to get reimbursement in the future, or want to turn around and ask for reimbursement in the future, even though we're still using our own money, we still have to get a federal authorization.
It's the
correct?
time the work is done. So at the time the work is done, you need federal authorization. There's no going back. It doesn't matter because actually we always front our money and get reimbursed by the feds. They're a reimbursement process. So we pay, they reimburse. So they really don't care if you said it was 100% state, went back. At the time you do the work, you begin talking to the people, saying anything, we'll buy this for whatever, you have to have that authorization in place. Okay, anything else?
Looks like you covered federal authorization pretty good. I don't hear any other questions.
Yeah.
When is federal shutdown?
Federal shutdown is in September, at the end of September. They usually start shutting us down because it has to get completely through. And federal shutdown is actually shut down in Washington. So there's no way anybody here, even division, can stop it. I think it's usually about the 26th or whatever, Washington flips a switch and it's done. Everybody goes to read only. The division will shut us down even before that because they have to get everything through the system. So I think this year it's like the 10th is when I'll need everything by. If you have something after that, you can always ask, you know, if I have time to get it in, because usually on the 10th I get a bunch of them, so it's gonna take me a few days. So if you have something at the last minute, go ahead and ask if I can get it in. I definitely will try to get it in for you because the federal system usually doesn't open up until about the 5th or 6th of October. And they are not in a hurry for anyone.
Okay. Next.
All right, I'm Doug, and I work on getting the encumbrance requests into the system so they can eventually get into Oaks. I did make myself some notes because this talking thing isn't my thing, but I realized I should have written down, hey, what's a good definition for what is an encumbrance? But I don't have one. But basically what an encumbrance is doing is setting that money aside, so whenever there are bills, that there's definitely money there to pay them with. It'll go into Oaks, they'll call it an Oaks purchase order, and so then that's what they'll use to pay invoices off of.
And the state is required to do that. Once we know we're going to owe money, we do have to encumber and set that aside.
It's statute, right? It's a law.
Mhm.
Right. So most of mine come in, we have a email inbox that, I don't know if you need it, DOT encumbrance requests at dotohio.gov. But those come in and I work, the form comes in, just a one-page form that's out on our SharePoint site. That'll come in, and usually within a couple days, I've put it into the accounting system, and then it takes overnight, a day or two to go into Oaks to get an Oaks PO number, and then the next step then is Ellis picks up that information. So it may be 5-6 business days from submission till it appears populated fully in Ellis. Might be a little shorter if my turnaround's quicker. Might be a little longer if it's a SAC that needs a program manager's signature, so it's not on my desk all the time. I take it to whoever needs to sign it. But generally, 5, 6, 7 business days after I get it, it's usually in. Now, if you know well ahead that you're going to need it, it's better to get it in, as opposed to waiting a week before it's due. But that's kind of the time frame. Then once it's completely through the system, I give copies of them to Dina, the Oaks, the PO that is created.
And I put them in physical.
But basically, this one-page form, it just has information on it, like the PID and the county route section, the state job number, what the federal project number is, and those types of things. That just helps to identify it and make sure I'm working on the right one. I'll bring it up in Ellis and compare that information and make sure I've got the right project. Because people are reusing that same form, and sometimes they've got the state job number from the previous one on it, or the PID from the previous one on it. So we're just comparing several fields just to make sure we're looking at the right project. Then when I go to, I'll bring it up in Ellis, and there should already be an encumbrance request in a funding event, because when I enter into the system, I'm going to populate whatever encumbrance number we give it. I'm going to populate that information into Ellis, and then that allows Ellis to retrieve the rest of the financial information a few days later. There is a description on the encumbrance request form, and under description, and that'll be things like, they'll put things like acquisition of 3 parcels, or negotiations and closings, whatever's happening, so we know what we should code it under. Appraisals and appraisals reviews, things like that. Sometimes I'll get 3 sentences, sometimes I'll get 2 words, but all I can see something that's it's an appraisal or it's a property acquisition, something like that, just to give us so we know what it is. Then there'll be a vendor name and address, things like that. The agreement and the controlling board number will be on there, so we can populate those fields. Then the object code, and I have a little note on my desk that I've had since I started, and it says appraisals and appraisals review 572054, and negotiations and closings 574000. So that I've had that sitting there all the time, so I can remember which codes. I kind of know them now, but that note is still on my desk from like the second day I started. But then on there also will be what the encumbrance name is, and the amount that needs to be encumbered. And then I'm going to go in and I'll use that Ellis funding event to see what SACs you guys are intending to have this encumbrance put under, and then, so I know which, so how to code it. And once it's in, if you need to increase it, decrease it, whatever, you can just send me an email that says, hey, we have encumbrance number, 6, whatever. Could you reduce it by $1,000? If you're going to increase, or could you increase it by $1,000? Now, if it's one that needs a program manager's signature, you can also submit that encumbrance form. That form has a spot, whether it's new or if it's a modification. So you can mark modification, and then the program manager will have somewhere that he can sign it.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
I'm still confused on when I should check the existing, because sometimes I'll do it and then it gets changed when it gets down further up the chain, and it'll say new, because I want to add money to, an already existing encumbrance, and then, but somehow somebody changes it, and it says it's new.
Okay, if the current encumbrance is from the prior fiscal year,
Yeah.
we can't add directly to it, so it'll become a new one.
But what happens if it's not the same? It's been changed for some reason.
Hasn't changed and the number's been,
No, not the numbers, just the type of additional encumbrance requested. I want to encumber it from the same exact encumbrance number, but
Okay.
it's somehow, when I check existing encumbrance and I put that number, somehow somebody gets it, somebody changes it. It says it's new. Is there a reason for that?
I'm not sure what you're
You mean
looking
the
at.
form change?
If it's crossing fiscal years.
Prior fiscal year.
I've seen it where it was, and I got that part, but then I've seen it where it wasn't. It wasn't a different fiscal year.
Well, because the other thing that would be is that if the encumbrance has reached 0, we can't add to it either, even if it's the current
that could be
fiscal
it.
year.
That could
So
be
we
it.
would end up with a new encumbrance.
And call it something right now.
Then it would have whatever. I just pick the next number in line basically. So
Okay, I'll check on
that may be what it is. That
Thank you.
or if it's using different. If you're now changing, if you used 4PS7, but now you're using 4BC7 or something like that, then it would be
Yeah,
another
I'll change
encumbrance.
it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
But just to be clear, you're saying you can't add money to encumbrance if it's not in the same current year?
Right. Now, to do that, we would just do a new encumbrance, and usually in the comments, I'll put that it's a modification to
Got it.
a prior one, but systematically, it's a separate encumbrance.
It's paid all the way down, regardless of fiscal year. Or if you've used all the money on it, regardless of fiscal, if it's within the same fiscal year, you still can't mod it. It would have to be a new one.
But as long as you keep adding to the encumbrance, you don't need a new one. It's only as the encumbrance goes to 0 without it ever being modified, then you get a new number
Within the fiscal year.
within the fiscal year.
All right, I'm at the bottom of my page, so unless there's something else, we'll go with Margaret.
Okay. I'm Margaret, and I was asked to speak on the whole right-of-way invoicing process, how to get a warrant to you as soon as possible. It starts with the RE24. You fill it out. Once Doug gives you money, you get the RE24. Well, you know what? Let's back up. It starts with the vendor. Everyone's familiar with shared services, requesting the vendor information from shared services. Once you get that vendor number, you create your RE24, you send it to me via the inbox. All the right-of-way invoices come to me through the right-of-way inbox electronically. And the inbox address is dot.capital.rw.invoices@dot.ohio.gov. And if anyone, I can go back over that. Someone needs that. But anything that's received by 10:30 a.m., we get processed by the 11:30 shutdown. Because every day at 11:30, our systems goes down for the quote-unquote noon run, which is our daily transfer of files into the OAK system. So if it's in by 10:30, I have money on the PO and I have a vendor set up in AA, it should be entered that day. Day 2, After it's in, the next day morning by give or take 10:30, I have to go in and send a list of all the invoices that I put in the prior day over to OBM in order for them to mark all of those checks as separate pay. I know that's the big thing. If that list is not sent over, we're down, OBM's down for some reason, and then I have to send out a mass email saying, oh, by the way, I didn't get to that list, or we've sent list over. If OBM is down, they can't mark it separate pay. Day 3, after day 2, noon run, it should be marked separate pay. Once day 2 noon process is run, a date should be in Oaks of when that check will pay out. And usually 3 days from the date it's entered, I have a check. And that check is taken to the mailroom, your ponies pick it up, or someone calls me and say, hey, I need it today. Someone picks it up, or I've overnighted them. But usually from 10:30 a.m. to 3 days later, you should have a right-of-way check. Hopefully it's marked separate and you'll have an individual check. Exceptions are if we're in meetings, if there's all-day meetings or meetings scheduled sometime in the day, there's system downtime, out of office. Yesterday I was out, and that's when I usually send an email saying, hey, for whatever reason, we didn't get to send the list over to OBM. And if you don't get it over day 2 a.m. in the morning, it's too late. Because once the batch process runs, we can't mark them separate pay. We get that one shot the next day in the morning. And that's it. And we don't have any control over that. They won't give us access to do it ourselves.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Sometimes we'll make requests to have the warrant sent to the district office or maybe to AG's office or somewhere. So where does that happen in that process? Once the warrant comes back to you, that's when you mail them out to the various parties, or?
Yes. Separated, and if it's going to the AG, we make a copy of it. The copy goes to the district, the original goes to the AG. Or if mailed. Everyone does not get their check copies back. It depends on what you tell me to do in that box on the RE24. Most people just put their district 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, mail. You tell me what to do.
Where is shared services? Is it housed here in?
No, it's actually off of 5th Avenue, over by the airport.
Okay, it's uptown somewhere and then it's
I think it's over by the airport.
It's over by the airport. Columbus.
Then how about OBM? Or
They're downtown.
they're downtown. So OBM cuts the check, and how does that check get to here to you, to the central office?
Courier, the mail.
All right.
Our mail room does a run every day.
Okay.
Our pony runs down to OBM every day.
And then we have a pony that picks up only every Wednesday from the
Okay.
central office and comes to our district. So it's always a timing issue for me if I'm kind of under the pressure
okay.
of hitting the deadline, that I get that check to the pony man on a Wednesday. If I happen to catch it on a Thursday, it comes here, I wait a whole week before I get it delivered. So we always watch that days of when it
Okay.
gets delivered to central office, that maybe I might have to send somebody up to pick it up, or I
Okay.
check to see if I got any district people that are here that can transport it back.
Okay,
To our local
absolutely, and I get that a lot. Yeah.
Just a quick question, you sent an email out yesterday maybe, about Nancy's retiring, and then, but it made it sound like your replacement's been hired, Jonathan Horn, and I was like, where's Margaret going? But you're still there, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Jonathan's replacing Nancy.
No.
She replaced Nancy.
Oh, you
I'm not,
replacing Nancy.
well, replacing Nancy is a broad statement. Yeah, and I keep telling people, Nancy is not replaceable. That was a big brain. That was a lot of knowledge that
Yeah,
that
so you're gonna
retired.
do the ODOT ones, and then Jonathan's doing the LPA reimbursements?
No, I will be doing LPAs. Whatever Nancy was doing, I'm taking,
Okay.
yeah, I will be doing that.
Well, I figured-
Jonathan will be doing the right of way.
Okay, he's gonna do the right way?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you need to look at that, it's a lot clearer, because I was like,
Oh, okay.
where's Margaret going? Nancy Lee's in Margaret, what?
Yeah. And another question Dan asked us to speak on is the time frame. The time frame is pretty much 3 days. From 10 o'clock a.m., 3 days later, there should be a check. Checks are actually, our courier, our pony actually picks them up the day before the warrant date. So this afternoon, we will receive checks that are dated the 25th. What is today? 24th? Yeah. So we'll get the 25th checks tomorrow. And I know there's been incidents, we pulled checks because you needed them and because either pony issues that hold timing. The only difference is they can't be hand delivered or whatever until tomorrow, but you can get them in hand if someone has picked up tomorrow's check today, or we'll overnight them. If we can get them in by 2:30, we can overnight them to you, and we've done that before. But that depends on our pony. We can request they go down to OBM early, but that's however they're run, because they go to different locations within the city.
Does your pony run every day?
Between OBM and some of the different locations, yes.
Good.
Yes. And they have to go to OBM in order for us to get the checks. The only week I know that you can get them early is payroll week, because they do go pick up checks early the week of payroll. Expedited checks. There is no expedited check process, which is literally out of our hand. We transfer file to OBM, and from there, they put out a check, and it's within 3 days. That is the fastest they will cut a check.
You don't have a checkbook in your top drawer.
The one that's in the top drawer, you do not want me to write a check. But yeah, there is no expedited check process. We can overnight them if we have someone picking them up. That can save you a day, but there is no in on Monday, check on Tuesday kind of thing. And one of the other things I want to talk about is encumbrances and final invoices. Right away, usually don't send me say this is the final invoice, this is the final piece of the pie that you're sending me. So closing out POs, we usually don't close out POs until I get an email, or every year when Nancy's doing, or she was doing refinance, she would send out the list to each district asking you, hey, do you still need this money? And you would close them out. We can do, if you're done, just send me a quick email and say, hey, close out, release this money.
So if you just put final invoice on the right bill, that does not help you?
Usually, no, because at 10:30, between 10:30 and 11, we're trying to key to get those invoices in the system, and we could miss that final if you put it on there. Yeah. But that email just to say, you know what, we're done, if you can release this money, that's fine, and you can get it back. I think the new.
Y'all ever meet?
You scared?
Yeah.
I guess the last thing is
The DSRs.
the emergency process for emergency right-of-way. Alana sent out an email right before shutdown. I guess it starts with you and the encumbrances. Well,
No, it starts
with
with,
Heidi.
it starts with.
Unless there is a rock in the middle of the road and you have to get on there now, you really need to follow the regular process. You have to get a federal authorization. So we have to go through that process, because eventually you're gonna have to get the federal authorization, and then we can get that encumbered. If you want to move on to construction, if it's not because you won't need to move the rock out of the road, if it is any type of restoration, Daniel Broadegg is now requiring the environmental and the right-of-way to be cleared. So make sure you are getting that project in Ellis, and that you get the DSR and you get federal authorization as quick as possible. As soon as you put that project into Ellis and you have a DSR number, you should be requesting the environmental and the right-of-way. And then Doug can get your encumbrance.
Doug and Margaret, what are some of the common issues you guys have observed with the encumbrance process, problems that you see over and over again?
You know what, the right-of-way encumbrances are actually pretty clean. I don't,
That's good.
as far as what I get, usually the agreement's there, and usually if it has it's a controlling board, the controlling board's usually there. Sometimes it's like last year's controlling board, and I have to put the right one in. But like if the ones from 17, maybe they're rolled up into a new controlling board, like from like if it was, I don't know, I'll make up a number, 571 in 2017. When in 2018 it got rolled up into like 585 or something like that. So sometimes I make that adjustment when I'm going to put it in. But that's across the board. That's not necessarily just on right-of-way ones.
Did you want to mention the DSR ones, the other ones?
Yeah, there was that what they were talking, that Alana had sent up, and we haven't yet gotten one under this method, but I guess this was a way to get a check out quicker than would normally happen, and I think there's a process to get a Oaks number for, and I'm kind of just speaking from this email, so I might need help. But they're getting an Oaks number for, if I'm understanding it right, getting an Oaks number for the property owner, so that when that and according to this, it sounds like it's something that can be done. If you have a laptop out in the field, they can log in and request an Oaks number, and that's ahead of when I usually see it. So I'm not really sure how that process goes on how what they need to do. It does say they need a copy of a canceled check, but beyond that,
And the important thing is you really can't go use petty cash.
Yeah.
That's the biggie. We need to pay them with a check and get reimbursement from the federal government. The one thing about the DSR ERs is, and I know there's really no such thing, but to ODOT, it's free money. It is above and beyond what we normally are allocated. So we want to make sure we can recoup every penny of that DSR money through the federal government, and we can't do that if we are using petty cash. So we want to make sure we can follow as closely as we can to that, because we really do need to get federal money reimbursed for every single penny that we can.
The only thing I can say is, and it's all about timing, when you ask what things we might be seeing, it's supplier, it's vendor numbers. And it's only because when you get your vendor number from Oaks, it's not in AA yet, because they have to file transfer back to us in order for us to get that vendor number in AA. So sometimes I do receive RE24s, but the vendor number isn't in AA yet. And then there might be time when there's not enough money to cover to cover the invoice on that particular PO that's listed on the RE24.
Well, I always recommend that they double check in AA to make sure that
The vendor
the
is there.
vendor is there and they have the right address code.
Because it's a day late, it's a day delayed from when Oaks set it up, or shared services set it up, gets then Oaks, and it comes back to AA.
Any more questions?
Just Dina, and what the interrelationship between Office of Real Estate and Office of Finance as it regards to encumbrances, how does that work?
Well, Doug usually gives me copies of the encumbrances, and when I get them, I put them in
Okay.
to fiscal, just so that on the programmatics, they draw down. And I always double check all the programmatics every Monday to make sure that we are matching AA.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the table real quick, see if anybody's got any questions. And So I don't think anybody from District 1 is here, so let's go District 2. Anybody from District 2, any questions?
No additional questions?
Okay. District 3, any questions? All right. District 4, any questions?
No?
I asked where I needed to know.
All right. District 5, any questions?
Have questions.
District 6. District 7. District 8. Okay, District 9.
No
Questions?
questions. I would like to comment that we've had a very good relationship and everybody in finance has
Good.
been great for us.
Thank you.
That's good news. All right, District, nobody's here from 10. District 11.
Well, I'd like to break the chain there and just ask a question.
Okay.
Maybe to encumber, if I would accidentally send in an encumbrance request and I didn't have federal authorization, would you catch that?
Typically, yeah. I look at Ellis. And,
Thank you very much. Let's just put it that way.
He's asking for a friend.
And I don't want
You never make
to.
such a mistake, Steve.
usually what you'll get is an email from me saying, hey, we don't have federal authorization. Am I supposed to wait for federal authorization to occur, or are we using a different SAC?
I want to thank you for that balance and check because that is an important thing. And I always thought we should have a little bit of a balance and check, somebody making sure that that didn't
That is
happen.
one of the things that position was always supposed to, that we are always required to do, and Doug does a very good job of it.
And I want to thank you all for your help in, things have got a lot quicker in getting and receiving our checks. The whole process has sped up. Thank you for listening to the districts. You know, we're the ones out there knocking on the doors, meeting with the landowners and trying to get them paid. So thank you for your help with that.
And we do try, and anytime you have a problem, please don't hesitate to call. You know, even if there's a problem with a project, a problem with anything, the sooner we find out about it, the better we can help.
District 12.
No questions?
All right, we've gone around the table. It sounds like you guys have done a great job on encumbrances, and thank you very much.
I got
Oh.
two quick things.
Uh-oh. We almost made it.
Sorry. So I have two quick things. So first, you mentioned getting full right-of-way authorization whenever you can. What about for utility relocation?
Well, utility now includes full, but if you just need utility, you can get just utility, that would be a partial. But once you ask for full right-of-way authorization now, we get everything. It's for everything. So utilities, right-of-way services, everything.
The other thing is, what do you feel like is the most common error that you see come through, and what could we do to resolve that on our end?
The one thing I see is that you're not in right-of-way services, which one of these days Federal Highway might say something, because I put in there revising to reflect, modifying to reflect revised estimate, when really it's, I'm adding right-of-way services estimate. So, and I know it's not anything that you individually can do, but if you could talk to your environmental people and say, when you know there's right-of-way, let us know. Or if you try to just get your right-of-way services in there from the beginning. That's probably the most common issue, is environmental asking without letting you guys know. Anything else?
All right, anybody else from central office? All right, well, this time, I think we really are done. Thank you so much, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.